All right, here we go. More of the basics. Before we did writing formulas, now we're going to read the formulas and name them. Okay, so now we're going to do the opposite. All right, and there's kind of an order you want to go in when you see a formula. All right, so I'll just put some random formula up here. Don't go crazy on this, but it's just this one example. Let's say I had barium oxide, BaO. Okay, when you see a formula, the first thing you should look for is one, the type of positive ion. Okay, the type of positive ion. So really what I'm looking for is a couple things. Is it a nonmetal? Is it a transitional metal? Or is it just a normal, I guess you could say, S-block metal? All right, and by the way, transitional metals, these are D-block, guys. This is the D-block elements, all right, if you learned about the D-block and the electron configuration. All right, so first thing I look for is what type of positive ion. The positive ions are always listed first, so my positive ion is going to be barium. Okay, so if you look at barium, look it up on the periodic table, barium is, it's not a nonmetal because all nonmetals are on the right-hand side of the periodic table. It's not in a D block, it's an S block. All right, so that'd be your first thing. Check out the type of thing. So then this S block tells you, so if I had this, I would need a prefix. Remember, like mono, tri, stuff like that. If I had these, I'm going to need a Roman numeral. And I'll check out the Roman numerals in our last examples. All right, but if I have S block, I have nothing. I just name it. All right, so Ba is just barium. So then I say barium. All right, so I write that out. That'd be my first part of my formula. Second thing you got to do, okay, type of negative ion. All right, in this case, the type you're looking for is it polyatomic? In other words, is it two or more atoms? And by the way, you could have a polyatomic for this one too. That does happen. All right. Or is it just an element? Say singular element. Horrible handwriting, but we'll make it through. Singular element. So how it works is this. I look at this, well, it's just oxygen. It's just O. All right, so it's a singular element. I just name it. So it's going to be barium. And a lot of people will say it's barium oxygen. Nope, that's not right. Okay, the bad part is whenever you have elements, if it's not given to you in terms of, if you look back here on your list, if it's not given to you, like for example, like arsenite, arsenate, borate, if that's not given to you like this, you end it in IDE. So it's not oxygen, it's barium oxide. All right, and some of them can be a little tricky, like, you know, iodine can become iodide and things like that. So some can be a bit tricky, but that's really what you got to do. So when you're naming these things, you really got to look at the positive side and the negative side and figure out what you have, and then just check for any special conditions. For example, nonmetals need prefixes, transition metals need Roman numerals. Other than that, it's really just naming it out. All right, so let's try a couple here. All right, hopefully this helps a little bit. So we look at this, one's on the bottom, PbSO4. Well, Pb is lead. If you look up on the periodic table, SO4 is a polyatomic ion in the back. So you got to say, well, I have a positive half and I have a negative half. All right. Now, here's the tough part about doing the transition metals. So I know it's lead, and I know SO4 is sulfate, because that's on my polyatomic list right down here, SO4 sulfate. All right, so now here's how I figure out what the charge of lead is. Going by this formula, I have 1 here I have a 1 down here for the lead. It's not written, but it's understood. But I know that sulfate is always a 2 negative because that's given to me on my list. All right, that's given to me on my list down here. See down here, 2 negative. but there's not a 2 down here. That means it got canceled out. All right? And in order to cancel it out, that means that the number that from lead that went down outside of the 4, the parentheses of 4, that means it probably was the same. So this is actually lead 2 sulfate, okay? Because these two charges canceled each other out. The 2 and a 2 cancel out, just like you can reduce a fraction. They went down to 1 to 1, and it's lead 2 sulfate. So you got to be careful with those. They have a little bit of a trick to them. All right, so there's a little bit. Some of them can be a little bit tricky, especially Roman numerals. This one's pretty straightforward. Fe2O3. Well, I know Fe is iron. I know O is oxygen, but remember, it's not oxygen, it's oxide. All right, we got to change that naming. Now to figure out the charge or the Roman numeral that goes with the iron, I look at this 3. This 3 wasn't with oxygen normally, and it came from the iron, so you got to think backwards. So this is actually iron 1, 2, 3, oxide. All right, so transition metals have a little bit of a trick to them, so watch out for that little trick. All right, when I have these ones down here, these next two, these are just S block metals, which you just name straight out. So Ca is calcium, which I just look up on the periodic table. I is iodine, but remember it's not iodine, it's iodide. Okay, remember that ending you have to change it to when it's just a binary compound. Binary means you have just 2 elements. Just 2 elements that make up the formula. Then I go over here, Mgn. Well, Mg is just part of the S block. So Mg is magnesium. And N is nitrogen. So it's not nitrogen, it's actually nitride. All right, so there's a little bit of a trick to it. Chopped a lot of it off at the end. But that IDE tells you that there's only 2 elements in this formula, magnesium and a nitrogen. All right? So when you have S block, there's no real trick. It's just basically name them both out and just make sure you change your ending to the appropriate ending. Now this next group, just nonmetals. So I got to use prefixes now when I have nonmetals. So N, I have 2 N's. So what's the prefix for 2? Di. So it's dinitrogen. Notice how I don't change the beginning to IAD. And then I have 1 oxygen. I have to put a prefix for the second one. It's monoxide. All right, monoxide. All right, 2 nitrogens, 1 oxygen. OF2, yes, that can happen. Now this is going to be oxygen. All right, because there's a 1 there. You don't have to. You could write monoxide if you wanted to, but you don't have to. All right, and then I have 2 fluorines. Difluoride. All right, oxygen difluoride. So, just to sum it up, reading and writing formulas. Figure out what type of positive ion you have, to figure out what special situations are going to come up, and then really it's just naming it out. All right, and then a little bit of, once you get more practice in recognizing what the charges are, it gets a little bit easier in time. So take your time, work through this. Hopefully the basics helped you out, and then in the next video we're going to talk about special situations.